so many people.
That's great.
So many people this morning, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Swadika.
ดีครับอาจารย์ครับ
สวัสดีครับท่านอาจารย์
สวัสดีครับอาจารย์
เชิญคุณแอนเริ่มค่ะ
Okay, is anyone, somebody like to start us off today? With questions or comments about last week or anything else? I have a question, I just have to find it. Excuse me, it has to do with our discussion last week about Indriya, and probably more important than the name is the understanding of it. But near the end of the discussion, Ajahn, you talked a bit about how at this point, what is important is understanding that which appears, and the difference, the subtle differences between various aspects of what is appearing. And I guess the first thing I wanted to clarify, when you talk about what is appearing, you are talking about not what arises, because many things arise, but only what appears. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So
At a time.
yes, I'm looking for what I've got here. So when we talk about Indriya, then we're really just talking about the difference between each, shall I say, in the case of Nama, that arises, for instance, Jitta, the chief in experiencing, kind of arises with feeling and attachment, ignorance. And is it feeling that is what it is that until there is much more understanding, it is feeling that is what appears primarily, and from that we if it's pleasant feeling and ignorance, that basically what appears is the feeling. For instance, when they're seeing something pleasant, the feeling is what indicates the pleasantness, and perhaps the attachment. It's not the attachment that appears so much, it's the feeling.
So now it's time to understand what is appearing in order to understand other words of the teachings of the Buddha about it. For example, it's not the word, but at this very moment to understand Indriya. What appears, can it appear without that which experiences it? See,
No.
beginning to understand this moment, little by little, one by one. So what can experience that is a reality, because no one think about it before. No thought about that which experiences, but thinking much about that which is experienced, right?
Yes.
The moment of birth, yesterday and today, up to now, what is appearing? What about that which experienced it? No thought about that at all. That's why even it is the very important one. But without understanding, one cannot understand it. One cannot understand the characteristic of that reality. Just heard about it, think about it, but without the understanding of how it is the very important reality. Otherwise, nothing can arise at all. So why this moment? Because this moment can lead to understanding that characteristic of a reality which arises and experiences that little by little each word to understand what is there as it is one by one. For example, now we don't talk about that which is experienced, but we just talk about that which arises by conditions just to experience what the object is now appearing. That's all. Without that, there is no world, nothing at all. Nothing can be known, nothing can be experienced. No sight, no sound, everything. That's why is it not important as the Indriya? And even it is the reality which can experience the object. But there are also other realities which can experience object as well, arising together. But we talk just about one at a time to understand why it is the Indriya. Because the Cetasika, we use this term because everyone knows what we mean. Cetasika also arises with Citta, and Cetasika conditions Citta to arise, and Citta conditions the Nama, the Cetasika, to arise. But when we talk about Citta, we don't talk about any Cetasika at all. We just talk about that which now seems. Is it not important? Is not Indriya the main thing at that very moment to perform the function of experiencing only the object, no like or dislike, because it's not Citta, it is Cetasika, other mental factors. But at this very moment of just seeing, no thinking about anything, no hearing, nothing, only that which sees now. Even we talk about it, how much we think about it, but it's not moment of beginning to understand the truth of it. Otherwise, it does not appear. It cannot appear as it is. Even it arises and falls away all the time. No thought, no thinking about it at all. But now we're talking about that which is very important as Indriya, the faculty of experiencing the object. It's there, experiences the object closely or clearly than other Cetasika, which also experiencing that object together, but perform different function from the faculty of experiencing clearly only the object. No understanding or no like or dislike at moment when it's there. Just talk about one thing alone, which arises and experiences the object. So it's Indriya, because without it, how can anything appears? But when it arises and experience, the object appears, and it appears so clear to that which experiences it, which is the faculty to experience only that, no other function, not its characteristic to like or dislike, but it is that which experiences. So that is Manindriya, see. So just begin to understand what is there as not self, and each one is different, because that which is the faculty of experiencing object, no one can perform, no other reality can perform that function at all. Impossible. That's why we learn to understand that why seeing is not self, the experiencing is not self, but the characteristic which just arise to experience does not appear as the object so clear as when it's there without other object at all. And that's the meaning of understanding clearer and clearer and clearer. Even now, it's just like that, arising and falling away, and just experience the object, but no understanding of it. That's why we talk about it, to understand more and more about each reality, so it can condition the understanding of no self and no thing, little by little, until it can reach another higher understanding, which can understand when direct awareness is there with direct understanding of no other thing but only that which direct awareness is aware of. Different one. So sati is indriya too. That's why we don't talk about many things together, just one at a time, in order to understand it clearer and clearer, to condition moment of letting go, no understanding and attachment and taking what is there as I or things. So now we learn to understand that without this understanding, there cannot be Chitta-nupassana Satipatthana, to understand that each moment is there, experiencing the object. It is not that which like or dislike or other characteristic at all. So this is the beginning to understand what is meant by reality, and how many realities are there. Not only Chitta, see, there are other realities too that can be studied and begin to understand the characteristic of each one as different ones, not together at all. Like now, what about the other Cetasika? They arise, they experience the same moment of Chitta, but they do not appear as object. So how can it show up as it is when it's not the object which is experienced with understanding? So begin to understand what is meant by Indriya. To study, to understand that without it, nothing can appear at all. So it's just develop the understanding of the truth that Buddha had enlightened, not just thinking over more than this, just why this is not Indriya, why Phassa is not Indriya, and so on. But what about right now? That which experiences is now experiencing, no understanding of it. That's why we learn to understand Chitta and different Cetasikas as Nama, but different function and different characteristics, in order not to forget that no one sees at all. It's that reality which arises and perform its function, just arise to see, just arise to hear, just arise to experience the smell when it's there. That's why that can be the understanding of that which experiences, and understand that without that particular reality, nothing can appear, nothing to be like or dislike. Begin to understand each Indriya one by one. Now, understanding the Manindriya, the Indriya of that which experiences an object. It's different from other Indriya. Otherwise, we remember how many realities are Indriya, that's all, and just talk about it. But what about when it's there? Otherwise, it cannot show up as it is, when there's no understanding of the truth of it at all. Only that which is the object, which is experienced, appear, no understanding of anything at all. But the truth is there, as no one and no thing. And so very short, arises and falls away instantly. And this is the world, the breaking world, each moment. Because without anything which appears, how can there be the world? And actually, it does not last at all. So very short. Only the enlightenment of the Buddha then he taught about the truth of what is now. Otherwise, no one can think about it, about the truth of it. Even it's there. That is what begin to be known as ignorance. No understanding at all of what is there from birth to death. And then everything this life is forgotten as soon as new life begins. And actually, in truth, it's every moment. But the succession of the seeing and hearing and thinking continue and form up the idea of self of things all the time. But what is born and what dies? And what about this moment? Just arise, experience, and then never arise again. No matter is the object which is now appearing, and that which experience it, the same, just arise and falls away. But the rupa lasts longer than citta. That's all. But even we talk about lasts longer than citta, only 17 moments. And what about this moment? Who can count how many moments for anything to appear, not as it is, but as something? So it's at the moment of experiencing it, thinking about it, remembering it as something, and so on. All are dhammas, all are different realities, arising and falling away all the time. Never be permanent at all. Shorter than anyone can expect. How it is. And the truth of it is that Buddha taught from his enlightenment. So begin to understand the indriya one by one. Now, the manindriya. But we can talk about any indriya when it's there. No need to try to line it or to make it in series, this first or that first. Anything can be known. Can there be any right understanding without understanding the manindriya?
No.
That's why this is life. This is this very moment. What appears is just one doorway as object. So now, where's I? Where's my arms, my legs? No, and nothing can be taken for that at all. When the object which is experienced is different from that which we take from leg or arms. To understand the absolute truth so that it can show up as actually there's no one at all. At moment when Panya is strong enough to experience it without attachment and ignorance, to take it for something as usual. So it is so true. That's why there must be truthfulness to the truth. Otherwise, it cannot be understood. When right understanding does not arise to be right, truthful understanding that this is the point of listening to the truth, just to understand. Because otherwise, Lopa is there all the time, unknown. So how can it be eradicated stage by stage? And when we talk about Ariya Satya, see, they are now. That which is not permanent at all. Without its arising, there cannot be that which is there experiencing or that which is experienced. Each one is different by conditions, that's all. And thinking about how much ignorance and clinging is there. Even the reality show up to right understanding at level of enlightenment as Sotapanna. Attachments are there, see. So one can imagine how much is there, attachment. But some people try to have no attachment to such and such. Impossible, as long as there is I who trying to do that. So it's only the understanding. Understanding is another indriya, see, so great that it can understand what is there. No ignorance as before to hinder the truth of it. But it takes time for right understanding to develop from hearing and considering to be firm enough to understand it. This is the point of listening to the truth. No matter about indriya and what is it, it's true as it is. But the function of panya and the function of citta is different. But they are indriya in itself, just by different manners, different characteristics. Panya cannot perform the function of citta, and citta cannot perform the function of panya. That's why learn more in order to know that no matter what is there at that very moment, the development of understanding develop little by little. After it is heard about the truth, is it strong enough to be directly understanding that object, which at that moment there must be sati, otherwise that object cannot appear to panya to understand it. So sati is another indriya. Satinsi, see, when it's strong enough to directly aware of the characteristic, not just take it as something as before. There is touching all the time, but is it moment of understanding or moment of akusala?
That depends on panya.
Right.
Panya.
Yes. Reality among all must be right understanding. The truth, which is not easy to understand or to directly experience it as it is. Little by little, it can be known from hearing in the beginning and then having confidence of the truth to follow up the words of the teaching about whatever is there right now. That's the proof. Talking just about the truth, the absolute truth of what is there. Otherwise, it's just thinking, no self, no one, they are just the absolute realities and so on. But what about now? The absolute reality, where is it? It's there, but no understanding to have firm confidence of no one and nothing at all. When panya does not develop enough. That's why now panya is developing little by little. Not other time, but at moment of listening and thinking, considering and understanding. Right now, the path, so very subtle. Who knows that without this, that's not the way. There's no way to understand the truth of what is there now as it is. So very short, but even that there are so many moments of what appears as nimitta. But now they appear as nimitta, as payanchana, anupayanchana. See, that's why no understanding of the truth because it takes time to listen and consider the truth, to have confidence to follow the truth, not to forget it by having time to read more, to learn more, until it can condition moment of thinking about the truth in daily life, only thinking in the beginning. Because without understanding, as pariyatti, how can there be that moment arising, even just to think about the truth in word? It can be, because usually there is thinking all the time. But when it's not thinking in word, it's not known, like now.
I'm sorry, Ajahn, you just said when there's not thinking in words, it's not known, like now.
Not known, right? Because the mind door follow the sense door, experience the same object, see?
Yes.
At that moment, right now, whereas the mind door follows the sense door. But it cannot see. It cannot experience the rupa directly as when it is to that sense door process. But it can experience exactly the same when it arises after the sense door. Right now, unknown. That's why I listen again, again, and again, because Panya begins to develop little by little, on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
That's why there is the Suttamaya Panya and Chintamaya Panya, which is Pravanamaya Panya.
And back to your original question, Anne. So what appears can be any reality, whether it's known or not. So visible object appears at a moment of seeing, attachment or aversion appear commonly, whatever is experienced. But Indriya refers to the ruling or leading dhammas. So at a moment of seeing, the seeing is the ruling dhamma or the leading dhamma, even though it doesn't appear. And the eye sense is the rupa, which is the leading rupa at that moment of seeing, even though the eye sense doesn't appear at all, because at that moment visible object is experienced. So Indriya is quite different from what appears now. So the Indriyas are those realities which are leaders in their particular spheres or in their particular ways. So seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching are leaders, leading experiences when they arise. Any other citta is a leader when it arises, the chief in experiencing the object. The 5 eye bases are leaders just at those moments when there is seeing, hearing. There are countless eye senses arising and falling away all the time, conditioned by karma, but it's only an indriya at that moment of seeing.
Yes.
And Vedana, so I think you have heard about Vedana as Indriya. So any kind of Vedana can be Indriya because of the importance attached to feeling. We find the feeling so important, as you mentioned. So no matter whether it appears or not, that feeling is Indriya. But I'd like to clarify a point with Ajahn on this. So when we read or hear that any Vedana is Indriya, Ajahn, is it just the Vedana when it is found important, like now there's indifferent feeling or slightly pleasant feeling, but no great importance is attached to it. But when it's very pleasant feeling or very unpleasant feeling, or you gave the example of different feeling in the attainment of higher jhanas, then it is the one that is very significant. So can we say it's only when the Vedana is very significant or found very important that it is Indriya or any Vedana?
When we talk about Indriya, we are talking about the truth of a reality. See? So now we just talk about Citta and different Citta, but what about the Citta itself? We don't talk about it broadly, widely, different kinds of Citta, but we're talking about just the characteristic, the truth of that which experiences the object. It's only one characteristic which does not perform any other function at all, just to arise and experience the object clearly, no matter it's dark, it's black or white or different colors and what we take for shape and form of thing. But the truth is that Citta experiences whatever is there as the object, not just the shape and form, but what about the smell and the taste and the touch? Any moment of experiencing, find out what are there. There must be Citta as the main reality, which the other Cetasika cannot perform at all. Nothing can perform the function of Citta. That's why it will lead to understand the characteristic of that which experiences is the chief of experiencing the characteristic of the object. So no matter it is akusala citta, moha mula citta, the object appears as it is to citta. We don't talk about the ignorance or other characteristic of mental factor at all. Just talk about that in order to really understand one reality at a time as it is, that it cannot be changed at all. The function of citta is that it arises and experiences the object. So now, no matter at moment of seeing the jewel, the diamond, or the jade, or whatever is there, the citta cannot know the name of it or whatever we are thinking about it, but at that moment it experiencing directly the characteristic of that which appears as the object, clearer as different objects. So that is the idea of different kind of jewelry, see, and so on. That's why learn to separate the citta from other realities which arise together in order to understand clearer about the characteristic of now, which is the chief of experiencing the characteristic of the object only, clearly, but not understanding the truth of it, just experience the characteristic. That's why we talk about one reality at a time. So at moment of citta, experiencing an object, see, in order to understand that that is not like or dislike or anything at all. We talk about the characteristic and the function of that reality. So it does mean that because we like it or something like that, so it is important or whatever, but it is the characteristic of that reality itself. So no doubt about citta now. That's why we can talk about other reality like feeling. There must be feeling arising together with citta any moment, no matter it's moment of pleasant feeling or unpleasant feeling or whatever. No one can change the characteristic of feeling. So we just talk about feeling, not other thing at all. Is it very important in itself, not as we think that this one is important than that one, or more like or dislike of that feeling, but the feeling itself, at any moment when it's there, whatever is there has to be under it. When it is pleasant, everything there, no matter Cetasika is there, is under the kind of such feeling, pleasant, everything pleasant, Cetasika and so on. Even it cannot perform the function of feeling, but the feeling overrule that which arises with it. That's why it appears as indifferent feeling. When it's there, nothing can be pleasant like when it is pleasant. So all depends on the feeling, whether it is pleasant or unpleasant or indifferent feeling, upekha. That's why there are many degrees of upekha arising with this and that. But it's not pleasant, it's not unpleasant. It is upekha, indifferent feeling. So we just talk about the characteristic of a reality which overall what are there arising with it, to be with such feeling.
That's very helpful.
Talk about
Yes, so even the slightest indifferent feeling is still a rula because it still affects all the other namas that arise with it. So it's still a rula in its way.
Sarah,
I
what
think
do you
this-
mean?
Well,
Go ahead, Sarah.
this is what I actually mentioned before in another discussion, that any Vedana, when it arises, is a ruler, a governing power. But afterwards, I wanted to check it. So when it's very pleasant feeling, it's clear that the attachment, all the other cetasikas arise, are swept away by that pleasant feeling, controlled or conditioned by it. But even when it's very slight pleasant feeling or indifferent feeling, the other cetasikas and the citta are conditioned by it. Nothing can appear very pleasantly because of the Vedana, which is just very slight pleasant feeling or indifferent feeling. So it overrules, it has a strong conditioning power on the other namas that arise with it. And this is why any Vedana that arises is indriya, is significant, is a power.
I have thought, I guess, and perhaps I haven't understood correctly, that the Vedana and attachment, the Cetasika conditions each other. But what I'm hearing from you is that the pleasant feeling arises or appear. I guess I'm not got to get the right word here. Either arises or appears prior to, and that conditions the attachment.
They rise together and they condition each other, but we have to consider why pleasant feeling is an indriya, but lobha is not an indriya. Why Vedana is khandha, but the second khandha on its own, because of the significance of the Vedana and because of its leadership role, its ruling role over the other dhammas that arise together with it. So they both condition each other, but one just has to consider why Vedana is an indriya, why it's said to be a ruler, but lobha is not a ruler.
So that, thinking this a little bit logically here, that means that lobha, there can't be lobha without pleasant feeling.
It can be lobha with indifferent feeling, but not as strongly as with pleasant feeling. So it's affected by the feeling.
Okay, so
like now there may be lobha unknown, just very slight lobha with indifferent feeling, different from lobha with pleasant, strong, pleasant feeling.
right, and feeling, help me remember, feeling arises with every citta.
Every citta.
Okay, so there's always going to be, yeah, there's always going to be opportunity for lopa or dosa. And by that, I guess if it arises with every citta, then, well, unless there's understanding arising, then there will either be very, very subtle lopa or subtle dosa. Is that right?
Pleasant feeling can arise with understanding of kusala cittas too.
Yeah, that's true.
And even neutral feeling can arise with kusala cittas. So we cannot just say because it's pleasant feeling, it's bound to be attachment. Usually, like after seeing, which arises with indifferent feeling, usually attachment follows. And usually attachment arises with pleasant feeling. But like now, there can be pleasant feeling with understanding for a moment too. But no matter whether it's with understanding or with attachment, the Vedana is an indriya because of its ruling power or its leading nature.
And I was just thinking for the sense jittas, for instance, seeing, Vedana arises, but there would never with seeing be lopa or dosa.
Not at the moment, not at the exact moment of seeing, but so quickly afterwards.
Process, yeah, in that process, yes, but not at the moment of seeing. I see.
Right.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
So Sarah, can I ask you a question here, please?
Hi, Tam.
Then Faksa, without Faksa, there's no Vedana. So why can't Faksa be Indriya? But it is a Pratyaya, but not Indriya. Could you please explain that? Thank you.
So it's a condition for Vedana by way of being nutriment Paccaya and by Sahajata Paccaya, but not by way of being Indriya. So because the Vedana is Indriya, but Passa is not Indriya. And as Ajahn said earlier, we can think and say, why not Passa, or why not Lobha, or why not this, or why not that? But one just has to consider a little bit more about the nature of Vedana and what its significance is. So different realities have a conditioning power or conditioning nature by different conditions. So Passa is an important reality. It conditions the other Chaitasikas and Citta by way of Ahara Paccaya, but Vedana doesn't. But they both condition each other by way of Sahajata, and Vedana conditions Apassa by way of being Indriya. So just different aspects to consider more deeply.
Thank you.
What about thinking? It's not an indriya like the sense door consciousness are, but can it be indriya? I think there is so much thinking.
And what is, when there is thinking, what is the leader at each moment of thinking?
The citta that thinks.
Citta that thinks. So each citta is manindriya.
Yeah, okay.
Mano in citta mean the same. So each citta at each moment of thinking is the leader in experiencing the indriya at that moment when it arises.
Great. So that's manindriya.
That's manindriya.
Yeah.
Or Ajahn was using the Thai earlier, maninsi. Manindriya. Yes.
Okay.
I have a question. So are all jittas classed as indriya? every citta that arises, is that classed as Indriya?
Yes, because at any moment that chitta arises, it is the leader in experiencing. So at any moment in life, there is always manindriya because there is always chitta. So there's never a moment in life when chitta is not the indriya.
Right, okay. And so it appears to me that Indriyas, it's a grouping of realities. So is it just classed as that, like we have khandas and we have, I can't think of anything else. Well, we have Indriyas. So is it like just another way of looking at namas and rupas?
I think it's a way of showing the aspect, the ruling aspect of particular dhammas, and also a way of showing the conditioning nature of those dhammas. Like as I just discussed of tam tan, passa is a nutriment condition. So when one looks at the ahara paccaya, one looks at those realities like passa and chetana and chitta and rupa, which are a nutriment for other dhammas, condition them in that way. And when we look at indriyas, we're looking at the aspect of the ruling nature of particular dhammas, like eye sense at a moment of seeing, ear sense at a moment of hearing. It's a ruler or governing power at that moment to make it possible for seeing to arise or hearing to arise. So it's a conditioning dhamma by way of being that ruling power.
Thank you. It does seem to be getting more complicated as we go on.
That's the dhamma, deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yes. Thank you.
And one realizes one may have read a list about the different indriyas and kind of with words like faculties, and it's just meaningless because no understanding about actually the reality. Yeah.
I'm finding it helpful in seeing more just how the interrelationship between various cetasika and jittas, and the more of that, the clearer it becomes intellectually anyway, the no self, anatta.
Right.
So as it's complex, and it's certainly deeper than we have sometimes discussed, but I can see how it's very helpful.
And like when Ajahn was talking earlier about sati and panya, like at moments of kindness or generosity, sati is there, panya may be there, but one has to consider whether it is indriya at that moment, because it's not the awareness that is directly aware of reality or the understanding which directly understands. Can it be said to be indriya? Is it a ruler yet? So no one can make sati an indriya, no one can make panya an indriya, but by beginning to understand more about different realities in different ways, in different aspects, as not self, as you say, gradually there is more understanding of what is meant by indriya, but slowly. It's a helpful topic.
The word faculty, that is sometimes used for indriya, and I guess it doesn't matter so much. If there's some understanding of indriya, then I guess if you call it faculty, then you can call it faculty, but from a conventional understanding of, has faculties for this and that, it
quite meaningless, I think it is.
Pardon?
I think it's quite meaningless. I don't find it helpful.
No, I don't find that one helpful either. Sarah, can you talk again, or Ajahn, about the way appears is used when talking about indriyas is not the same as when we say appears in other senses when not talking about indriya?
Like seeing now, seeing arises and experiences. It's the chief in experiencing. It's the indriya because it's the ruling power at the moment of experiencing, the leader in experiencing. But does the characteristic of seeing appear now? Is there any awareness of it? Is it experienced? So maybe what arises and what appears is quite different. Like now there's moments of lobha even while we're discussing Dhamma, but does it appear? In that case, it's not an indriya and it may not appear. Now sound appears, but sound is not an indriya. Ear sense at the moment of hearing is an indriya, is a ruling power or faculty, but the ear sense doesn't appear. It's not the common object of experience. So what appears is that which is experienced with or without understanding. But sometimes when appears is used, sometimes it's referring to what appears to understanding. So sound is experienced, but it doesn't appear to understanding. So it can be, depends on the context, whether what appears is just referring to any object that is experienced now, or that which is experienced as object of awareness and understanding. That it can cause a bit of confusion, I know.
Right. I've often used it, distinguished it in my own mind as what arises, but what appears is what to understanding.
And it, so for appears, it has to be the armana, it has to be the object. So many realities are rising, but they're not the armana, they're not the object of experience.
Yes. But it has to appear directly as the object with sati and panya.
So visible object is experience. We can say it appears, but usually it doesn't appear to understanding. So it depends on the context, whether we're talking about appears as the object of understanding or just that which is experienced.
Right. Thank you. And thank you, Ajahn, for your comments and discussion earlier when I first asked the question. It's all very helpful.
Just following up on the question of appears, as Sarah said, it has a technical sense of appearing to panya, but also a more general sense of what is being cognized and what one is aware of in the conventional sense. So,
yeah,
right now, things are appearing, but not perhaps what we might think they are, in the sense that visible object is not actually appearing, but what appears, and as I understand it, what we take for visible object appearing is actually thinking, or the object of thinking concept, because we have images of people and things at the present moment.
right, because visible object, unless it's directly understood, appears to those who where there is no direct understanding of it, it appears as people and things.
Well, it only ever appears to panya the conditioned realities
Yes, okay.
only ever appear to Panya. But roughly speaking, we can say
Right.
what appears now is the thinking about the visible object.
Yeah. Thank you.
So is that why we say that mind door covers up sense doors?
It seems that the sense doors cover up mind door. It seems that visible object is seen for a long time, but actually it's just for a moment that it's seen, and then there's non-stop thinking about it. But the eye door covers up the mind door in the sense that it seems that it's what is seen lasts a long time. But the truth is that the sense door experiences are so very brief, and there are many, many more mind door experiences. So understanding begins to understand the truth that seeing just arises for a moment and gone. Visible object, just the world of light, is just for a very tiny, tiny, quick moment, and then the world is dark. So in truth, mind door covers up the sense door, or in truth, there are many more mind door processes, but it seems that the eye door, it seems that what is seen or what is heard lasts for a long time.
I think that's why I always confuse that particular comment, because as you say, it seems to be like you're seeing all the time. I'm looking out my window and nothing's fallen away except the truck that drove past. But yeah, so it takes really well-developed panya to actually see a moment of seeing. And I actually don't know if panya ever does actually experience that one moment of seeing. Does it?
The visible object, what is seen, just the light is just for a moment and then gone. So that's why the understanding has to develop slowly to become more and more familiar with what the nature of visible object is, different from the thinking about the shape, the form, the color, the nature, the sign, the person, the thing, because this is all the mind or activity.
Just relating to your question about whether one moment of seeing can be experienced. Well, the characteristic of seeing can be known without it being one moment. So it doesn't have to be the seeing of a single moment in order for the characteristic of a reality to be known.
It can never be one moment. It always has to be the sign of the characteristic of that reality. So it's the nimitta of the characteristic of visible object or of seeing, which appears to understanding, not one visible object or one seeing.
If it had to be a single moment, then it would never happen, because the reality is invisible anyway, even in a general sense, let alone a single moment of it. But awareness can, by conditions, experience multiple moments of the one reality repeatedly in succession, even though they don't arise in absolute succession. There are other realities in between, but that's the function of awareness and understanding, to take a single reality as its object, but not a single moment of reality. and to understand from that the characteristic of the reality.
Oh, that's very fine definition, Jonathan. I'll have to think about that one.
Well, I think it's the way it was explained. It's explained by Ajahn, but she would no doubt have something to say here. I think I saw her.
Is it?
Microphone, come on.
I mean, it's easy to think that, for example, the first Vipassana Yana, which sees the difference between mind door and sense door, that's a reference to single moments, understanding difference in terms of one moment this, another moment that, but it's just different characteristics. Understanding is under this understanding characteristics, and it can never be one moment because it's too fast. That's why we are also taught and reminded about nimitta. We are told that it's too fast to know one moment, but there is nimitta of each reality, and the nimitta is the object of understanding.
Right.
Nimitta.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Azita.
It's hard to, well, what you said, Sukin, so you can't actually see the one moment, but there's nimitta. So, and nimitta can be understood. So I'm finding it a little difficult to
I was just going to comment on that.
Between the two.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on that. I think it's better to say that the reality is understood by its nimitta rather than to say the nimitta is understood, because although it's the nimitta that is the object of the awareness and understanding, what is understood is the characteristic of the reality. But that's a very fine distinction too, but I think that's what Sukin meant.
I mean, that characteristic cannot be one moment. Even to the highly developed panya, it's always the nimitta of the reality. Means many moments of arising and falling away of the same reality. That's the object of understanding.
And the reality itself, the visible object or the loba, has to have fallen away. So it can never be the actual reality. It's always has to be the nimitta of the reality, of the characteristic of that reality. Like now, if there's awareness of loba, there cannot be awareness with loba. Or at the moment when loba arises, the loba has to have fallen away. So it's always the sign, the characteristic of loba that is experienced, and the same of any other reality.
Then Sarah.
Just one moment, Tom. That moment of knowing, that has to be through mind door, right?
Through the mind door. Loba can only be the object through the mind door.
Right.
So there cannot be loba at that moment, but it is the nimitta of loba that's fallen away many, many times. It is the understanding of that characteristic of loba that appears. And it's the same with seeing or hearing. There cannot be understanding at the moment of seeing. And the seeing has long fallen away. Many moments of seeing have fallen away. So it's a nimitta of the characteristic of seeing that appears, that is understood.
So when you say seeing, you're talking about the citta that sees, or the visible
The citta
object?
that sees. So at the moment when the citta that sees arises, like now, panya cannot arise with it. And the object is visible object anyway. So how can there be understanding of seeing? It has to be the nimitta of seeing, of the characteristic of seeing, which appears in the mind door. But all the processes arise and fall away so fast, but it's always the nimitta which appears, and by appears means is experienced, and in this case is experienced by panya.
And if I can go back to that question, as I understand it, about your question about indriyas as against what are indriyas as against what appears. I think one example is at the moment of seeing, visible object appears, which is the, as Sarah was saying, is the aramana of the chitta. But there is the eye, which is the base. That's also an indriya, but that does not appear.
Yes. Yes, good distinction. Thank you.
Go ahead, Tom. Your turn.
I just want to ask Sarah, because Sarah keeps saying that we see just the way through the nimitta. Then how we ever have the direct understanding? Thank you.
So when there is direct understanding of a reality, for example, even when it's moments of satipatthana, when it's direct understanding of reality, what is understood? Can it be the actual reality of seeing consciousness? Because at a moment of experience through the mind door, there's no seeing consciousness at that moment. So it has to be the nimitta of the reality, even when it's vipassana jnana and the object appears so clearly. It has to be the nimitta of reality that is experienced, even if it's the great wisdom of the Buddha and seeing is the object of understanding. It has to be the nimitta of seeing, because the seeing itself has fallen away.
Right. But
So
how
it's
can
always
we see?
nimitta.
Yes. So how can, like Diane, like Ajahn keeps saying that we see one character or one object at a time.
Yes.
Apparently, nimitta, there's hundreds and lots of them.
It's one nimitta of a characteristic of reality. So when it is the characteristic of seeing that is experienced or understood, it is just the characteristic of seeing. It's just the reality that sees, that is understood. But in fact, it's that nimitta of seeing, but it's still one object, the nimitta of one kind of reality, seeing.
Thank you, Sarah. It's clear now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Also, it's me again. May I ask something else regarding about the Pavanga Chitta? For the Viti Chitta, you have the 7 universal Chittasika, or the mental states. What about the Pavanga Chittas? Do they have the same 7 universal Chittasikas?
We need to step back a little bit. When you're talking about the Viti Chittas, which Chittas only are accompanied by 7 Chaitasikas?
For example, the seeing process. Yes.
What do you mean the seeing process?
The,
I know when we talk about the seeing process, there are many Chittas in the process. Yes. So which Chittas exactly only are accompanied by 7 Chaitasikas?
The seeing.
Seeing, yes. Yep. What else?
Oh no, I'm talking just one chitta at the moment, accompanied by the 7. Yes.
only accompanied by 7 Chaitasikas. What about the citta after seeing in the idle process?
Or they after the idle process, there's the
No, still in the idle process.
you have the Sentirana, that sort of thing.
Yes, but how many
Yeah.
Chaitasikas? 7 or more?
7 also.
Must be more. So only seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching, only these cittas are accompanied by just 7 Chaitasikas. All the other cittas in the idle process or any process need more cittas. So one has to take one citta at a time. Like the citta with attachment needs many more
Yes.
Chaitasikas, or the citta with kindness needs many more Chaitasikas.
Yes, you're right. Yes.
So only the seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching need 7 Chaitasikas, but all the other cittas, even in the eye door or ear door process, need more cittas. So one has to consider each one.
Yeah. Thank you. But what about the Paranga Chittas, Sarah?
They need more Chaitasikas.
And what are they? Is it depend on the condition or?
Depends on what kind of Bhavanga citta you're talking about, whether it's a Kusala Vipaka or Kusala Vipaka. Because when it's Kusala Vipaka, whether it's with roots or not with roots, so each citta has to be considered separately, not just a quick answer to every question.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ajahn, if you're there, earlier we were discussing that whether or not, as awareness and understanding is developed, it is one instance, one moment of a reality that becomes the object of the awareness and understanding, or multiple moments. Could you say something about that, please? Thank you. Ajahn, we can't hear you.
Yes, I could hear. I can hear you and everyone.
Thank you, Ajahn. We were discussing a few minutes ago how when awareness is being developed and understanding, it is not a single moment of the reality that is the object of the awareness and understanding, but multiple moments of the reality that is taken as object by awareness and understanding. Would you be able to make some comments about that, please?
Can anyone make it different from now? The difference is that the understanding of that which is appearing, when it's there, is it moment of right understanding or not understanding the truth of that which is there? No matter that is the experiencing or that which is experienced, right understanding or no understanding, or just thinking about the story of that. The truth is so true that at moment of experiencing directly, no matter what stage of understanding, that which is now appearing cannot be changed. But the truth is that the right understanding is there, stronger to understand what is meant by one reality appears at that very moment. Otherwise, how can there be clear understanding of what we are talking about? So at that very moment, what is the object, even it's the visible object. It is just like now, but the understanding of the reality at that very moment is there so clear that nothing can be there at all, because only one object can be the object of experiencing, just one at a time. Keep on what is heard, because it's so true and it can be understood a little clearer and clearer. For now at this moment, so many reality like visible object appears as many things. That is not the truth of a moment. So we don't talk about the process yet, just talk about the way it appears. It does not appear as only that which impinges on the eyebase, but we study and understand it, how much ignorance is there until it gets a little bit clearer and clearer to understand each one as different ones. Otherwise, they are mixed because of the rapidity of the arising and falling away from moment to moment. That's why we learn to understand each reality, that it cannot be other reality, like citta cannot be any cetasika, in order to understand the characteristic which now experiences the object which is now appearing. Otherwise, even we know that, we understand that, but it does not appear as only one object yet, because Panya is not strong enough to understand the difference between what are there from one moment to another moment. The arising and falling away cannot be experienced. That's why they keep on like many things just follow one moment to another moment, different object and so on. But in reality, the truth is that there is no one and no thing. In order to understand better and better more about that which is now appearing. For instance, hearing and seeing cannot be the same moment, and that which is heard is not that which is seen. More and more, little by little, to begin to understand, to directly aware of the characteristic which is different, little by little. And so there can be a moment of understanding better about that which we are talking right now about, moment of seeing and moment of hearing. And if we just think about the story of it, how can the characteristic of that which is now appearing can become clear to right understanding that they are only different reality experienced through different doorways, that's all, and not stay long at all, only just at that very moment when it appears. But even at moment of its appearing, the rising and falling are there too. That's why we learn to understand the truth intellectually and know that what can be known when it's direct awareness is just like now, but right understanding begin to study, to attain to the characteristic which is not the same at all, little by little, to understand that it is a different reality. That's why we learn about what are there. Rupas, what kind, through seeing, and what is through hearing, through thinking, and so on. Just to condition, to be conditioned for moment of understanding when it's there, but not by anyone, but by the development of understanding, to have firm confidence of no one. That's why the path is so very subtle, because all depends on understanding. Without understanding from the very beginning, it's impossible to have right understanding, clear understanding of the object as it is, not there all the time, only when it's there. See, even right now, different sound appears when it arises and then falls away, and again and again and again. Where about the understanding? Just learn about it's not self, it's condition and so on. But why do we learn about this? To really understand the truth of each characteristic in order that it can be object, appear to right understanding. even at moment of have some idea about it after hearing about it in a day. So the proof how much understanding is the moment, any moment in daily life, when it is the object of just thinking, begin to remember the truth, it's already hard. Even that is not arise when there's not enough condition for its arising. So how come to be with understanding at moment of when it appears, the experience is not that which is experienced. That's why we just learn about the truth of each one in order for Panya to develop, to learn, to attain to the characteristic which is there, with some understanding or more understanding or very clear understanding. All depends on understanding. But no one can change the way it is. It has to be just like this. That's why the process of enlightenment is so very short, because every process is short as it is nimitta. See, learn to understand the truth, but try not to change, but to understand that even right now, it is just what Buddha taught about each doorway, each process. No one there at all. That's why while listening or while doing something, cooking and so on, there can be the moment of enlightenment, because it's as short as it's like now, but right understanding is so very sharp at that moment. It just like now, begin to understand what we are talking about, beginning to understand intellectually, but the truth is like it's taught that we have heard from the Buddha. Until then, how wonderful, unexpected reality, even it's not as we have experienced in daily life with ignorance, but right understanding is not ignorance at all, because the characteristic of anattanness shows up so clear, unexpected moment of understanding. No one can stop. It's there by conditions. What can be experienced with right understanding of that level are there, and then gone. And everything is just like the same, because even right understanding cannot last at all. Just arise and falls away. Very natural as it is. It proves the truth of what is there as it is, when right understanding is enough to reach that degree of no doubt about the characteristic, because it's there, appearing as it is. But now, as it does not appear as it is yet, there must be doubt about what is that which is now experiencing an object. It's there for sure, but as long as it does not show up, is there no doubt about it? Just experiencing only that object when one object is there. So everything which is heard becomes clear step by step, level by levels. That's why from intellectual understanding about the truth of sati and satipatthana and indriya and so on, it's not the moment of thinking about the word, because the characteristic shows up as the object. By then it's clearer than just thinking about it. That's why satipatthana is different from pariyatti and even kittayana. It performs a function, indriya, strong enough to directly aware of the characteristic with understanding. Otherwise, it cannot be direct awareness, because without understanding, even it's there now, how can there be the direct understanding of its truth, which is there? All depends on conditions. But there can be the moment of directly arising and is aware of one object, because understanding is there. strong enough to condition awareness to be directly aware of the characteristic. And Panya is there, understands at the very moment the difference between Pariyatti and Patipatti. But it takes time on and on to develop right understanding, or for right understanding to develop again and again, little by little, until it's so accustomed or familiar with that characteristic as not self. But as long as it does not appear as the moment of vipassana jhana, it's quite different from it is so clear. That's why there is the word vipassana jhana, the jhana which understand clearly. And when it's there, it's moment of directly experience the truth, no doubt about it. So how much different from daily life at the moment when it appears to ignorance and it appears to right understanding of different degrees. Reality cannot be changed. The way it is cannot be changed. That is the way to understand what is meant by satipatthana, or another word, sati sampajana, because it's there, very natural, but it can be aware of the characteristic, not the word, of that which is there, as we have heard about whatever is there as the object. No choice, no expectation, because it hasn't happened yet. So what is the object of right understanding? Can be object of right understanding because having such understanding enough to understand that no matter now or then, today or tomorrow or next life, depends on conditions. When right understanding is enough, no one can do anything, no expectation at all. So sudden that it means the anothernness of whatever is there, to be just that. Who knows what would be next moment, object? No one can know at all because it hasn't arisen yet. But when it's there, what about the understanding? How much understanding? Otherwise, there cannot be the understanding of the direct awareness and awareness with intellectual understanding at moment of hearing. It's not moment of ignorance or attachment, because the understanding is there at moment of hearing, but it's only understanding the truth of what is there, while it does not appear to Panya, which can understand it, because it appears now. But what about Panya? Can that level of Panya understand it as it is? And it falls very instantly. Everything is the same. Only Panya is there. Unexpectedly, that is Panya, never arised before, but without understanding, it's useless. Because anything can arise by conditions, even it hasn't arisen before. But there are conditions for that to arise. No understanding of pleasant feeling and whatever is there. That is ignorance. I experience that. And what is that? No understanding of what is there appearing at all. That's why develop right understanding of each characteristic so that it can become clear, even intellectually, about how it cannot be taken for something or someone or me or self at all. Very natural. It doesn't mean that anyone can change or it would be changed from daily life. But Panya is there, just right now. Without hardness, which is now appearing, how can there be the understanding of the truth of hardness? But when there's no understanding, hardness is there as something all the time. Even it does not appear, there is memory. Remember what is there. not forget. But when it's right understanding, what is there? Just conditioned moment, no expectation, what would be, even thinking about this or that, by conditions. The truth is no one and no thing. And what is there is not self. Nobody can make it arise. Nobody can have it fall away by conditions. That's why I have more confidence of the truth, little by little, but actually it's only very momentarily arising and falling away and never to return. So we study the teachings with a little more of understanding the truth, little by little, and that condition firmer and firmer confidence of no one and no thing, which appears, but it's that only that which can impinge on the eye base or ear base, nose base, tongue base, body base. That's all. Right now. So all depends on how much understanding of the truth will lead to more and more letting go. So understand of the truth get clearer and clearer, little by little. No other way. And this way is so very subtle because it is the fourth Ariya Satya. So just think how deep each Ariya Satya is, including the path right now. It develops by itself, by conditions, without hearing, considering, not forgetting about its truth. It can lead to more understanding and more letting go. When the food is not good, can there be understanding? Anything, any situation, any time. The truth is there as not self. So how much forgetfulness in the day after hearing and considering. But Panya develops in its own way. It does not mean that we understand this and that right now as it is, but the way, the reaction to what is there becomes to be known, little by little, but not as clear as when it's there as the object. And this is the only way to have less clinging to the self right now of the five khandhas. So each reality is so very deep, very subtle. And it is not just the word which can make it clear. The understanding of the depth, the subtlety of each one can condition moment of very careful study, developing the truth, the understanding of the truth. So do not underestimate the truth of each characteristic. No matter we talk about feeling or the citta which experience an object right now. Not under anyone's control, because in truth there is no one, only conditioned reality from moment to moment. So just talk about one reality at a time in order to understand it more and more, a little more, a little more. That's why we learn about in a moment what is citta and what are different citasikas and what is now appearing. There is always attachment and ignorance, but who knows? Only Panya can know or can understand the truth of what is there, little by little. At moment of very, very strong attachment, of great sorrow, unpleasant moments, that is so true. It shows up. What about the understanding of the truth of it? No one there, by conditions. Without ignorance, can there be such moments? So Panya is Indriya, that it can understand no matter what is there. As that characteristic is the object, so there can be the understanding of that characteristic. So when that characteristic arises, sometimes in future, right understanding is there to understand it as it's not self. No one cries, only that feeling or that reality is conditioned to be there and then falls away instantly. But one can see that how strong ignorance and attachment and akusala is, because no matter how much it can be known from the very beginning to the moment of enlightenment, there's still attachment, aversion, and so on. That's why the truth is that without higher deep understanding, far from being a sotapanna, the same reality arising and falling away all depends on Panya to develop more, to understand that even it's the present moment attachment, but the Panya can understand that as no one, more and more and more, from day to day, from moment to moment, from years to years, until the moment of experiencing the Four Noble Truths again. So the eradication of that can be eradicated. The attachment of different degrees.
And Tam on the subject of passa that you mentioned, I remember a couple of weeks ago, I think it might have been to you or someone else, Ajahn asked the question, can Panya condition passa? But whoever was asked didn't answer. So we know that the different Chaitasikas condition each other by Sahajata, but we can also consider how Panya conditions the passa by way of being Indriya, and also by being, or by also by way of adipati, pachaya, predominance condition. So the Panya also conditions the passa to contact a particular object by being an Indriya at the moments when there is direct understanding of realities. Just like I think last week we mentioned about Virya. Virya is also an Indriya at those moments. It conditions by way of being a ruler to study or understand a particular object. So we can see how different realities arising together condition in different ways. And it shows the importance of Panya and Sati and Virya as Indriyas, for example.
Thank you, Sarah.
And on your question about Bhavanga Chittas, I just mentioned briefly how I consider the topic. So we know that the birth consciousness, the Patisandhi Citta, can be akusala vipaka or kusala vipaka. When the Patisandhi Citta is akusala vipaka, it means the Patisandhi Citta and all the Bhavanga Cittas during that life and the Chuti Citta will be exactly the same kind of akusala vipaka. And when they are akusala vipaka, they are rootless. So that means no akusala cetasikas can arise with those cittas, but there must be the 7 universal cetasikas. So that is 7. And then we have to consider about the pakinakas, the particular cetasikas, whether they arise. And there are 6 pakinakas, the vitaka and vichara. They must arise because they arise with every citta other than seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching, and higher jhana cittas. So that means there must be 7 cetasikas. And adimokkha, usually translated as determination, it has to arise with every citta other than seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and the moha cittas with doubt. So adimokkha must be there. And last week we discussed about virya. Virya doesn't arise with any of the ahituka cittas apart from 2. So that means, just by my calculation, that there are the 7 cetasikas plus vitaka, vichara, and adimokkha. And there cannot be piti because it's not lobha or pleasant feeling arising at that moment. And the same with chanda. There's no attachment, there's no aversion, there's no kusala. So those pakinakas cannot arise. So only 3 extra. And when it is kusala vipaka, which is rootless, the same considerations apply. But when it is kusala vipaka, like in our lives, when there are the patisandhi and the bhavanga cittas are the result of kusala karma, and there are wholesome roots, then there must be minimum of 19 cetasikas arising. So, and more if panya arises, for example, those vipaka cittas. So that's why we have to consider for each citta, and it's not just a simple answer at all. And the reason that more are required when they are sobana cittas is because these are stronger cittas. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching are weak cittas. They only need 7 cetasikas. When it is rootless akusala vipaka, the bhavanga cittas don't need so many cetasikas. But when it's kusala vipaka with roots, the sobana vipaka cittas, it needs many, many more factors to perform their functions. So that's just a brief way that I consider it.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah.
Again, just to show how deep and complex, not just simple answers anytime.
Yes, thank you. I'm in the spider web again. Thank you.
That's why Ajahn stresses best to consider one word carefully at a time to really understand it. Otherwise, we get lost in the spider's web of our own thinking.
Thank you, Sarah.
Well, just to maybe add to the spider web, I was watching some ants the other day, and I was thinking about humans, insects, animals. We're all living on this same planet, but then I thought, but it's not the same realm. that we live in, because isn't it like there's the human realm and there's the animal realm? And when you were talking about Parisanti Jitta with roots, without roots, I thought, well, most humans are born with at least 1 or 2 roots, mostly, but animals,
three.
insects, or 3, yes, but
2
the
or 3.
animals, 2 or 3. Oh, okay, right. But the animals, the insects, they're not born with roots. And so I don't know where I'm going with this. It was just an interesting thing that, you know, yes, we share a planet, which is a concept, but we don't share the same realm. And then I thought, well, again, I'm probably putting animals and beings in a realm which is incorrect anyway, because realms are just jittas, Jetasika and Rupa. So I don't really have a question. It was just something I was thinking about the other day when I was watching these ants crawl up a tree.
And it really is moment to moment. Like I said to Tan, even each chitta in an idol process arises, different kinds of chittas arising with different chitta seekers. So it's actually like a different realm from moment to moment. So even at moments of seeing, no kusala or akusala factors, just the 7 Chaita seekers arising, quite different from moments of lobha afterwards or moments of kusala. So we think of people and we think of realms and we think of beings, but actually it's just one chitta after another arising by different conditions, accompanied by different Chaita seekers according to so many different conditions.
And I guess because we don't know that, well, we kind of learned it intellectually, but generally speaking, you know, I was thinking about with people, because we, well, of course, if we can't control what we see, what we think about, how come we think and really believe there's a me who can control? And it seems like there is, you know, people are getting on with getting on with their lives and things. But really, we're all in that spider web, as Tons said, that we're in a spider web of ignorance and attachment, which is why it just continues on and on. And it's you know, again, I have this idea that it's people doing things, but as you've mentioned, and I forget all the time, it is just Jitta, Jetasika and Rupa. Nothing else. And I mean, yeah, and that's very easy to forget when there's a big story going on about ants, people, the world, and whatever.
And that's the only point of considering these details, like what Chaita seekers arise with different Bhavanga Chittas, or when does Virya arise, like which Chittas now in an idol process does Virya arise with, and these kinds of points, just to really show that they are just different Chittas which are predominant, and different conditions affecting each one in different ways, and different factors like Panya and Sati, which can develop to be Indriyas, to really directly understand what appears now. So the purpose of all of the study in the Dhamma is to understand that there are just different Dhammas arising, conditioned in different ways, and falling away instantly, like the visible object not lasting for an instant. Because we are, like you say, so used to living in the world of the stories and the fantasies and ideas of people and beings and so on.
Thank you. I see there's a question from Tambak. So she says, where I am is too noisy. So may I ask a question to clarify a point? Virya, egakata are indriya in themselves or only when it is satipatthana? That's a question. And I can't answer it.
I think these 5 indriyas of sada, virya, sati, samadhi, and panya are only indriyas when understanding has developed and begins to directly understand the realities that appear now, like the sada that arises with any moment of kusala, or virya, which arises at any moment in life other than 16 ahituka cheetahs. I don't think we can say any virya or any sada is indriya, but only I think these factors are referring to the development of satipatthana. But let's see if Ajahn has more to add.
Does virya appear now? Does virya appear now?
Kasita, I think you are tan now.
To be truthful to this very moment, in order to understand what is there, rather than thinking about virya. But we can think about virya to understand what virya is. But the truth is that when it does not appear as the object, can it be known? Even we know from books how many cittas arise with virya. But as virya is not the object of experiencing, can anyone know that, oh, that is virya? We have studied about virya, and virya is there, showing up its characteristic and its function. See, that's why we talk about that which is there. And it depends when will it be object of understanding. If it does not appear, it's impossible to understand the truth of that which is there. Just knowing about, sorry, someone's coming. But it's just learning from what Buddha said, how many cittas with virya and how many cittas without virya, to understand whether now does virya appear or not. But when there is no understanding of it, even it's there, no understanding that it is no one, but it is a reality which has such characteristic and such function. Sometimes when we try very hard to do something, even opening the lid, which is so tightly, is there no virya? But we don't know. It's there, unknown. But we learn to understand what is virya, different from other reality, different from other cetasika, and not citta. There can be the understanding little by little, even begin to attain to that characteristic, which is not clear yet to be known. But it begins to know that it is different moment from when we do not have to try so hard to open something. See, that's why realities are there. No understanding of them as different realities, but from learning little by little, understanding a little more, whatever is there can be known. So the question now, whether is there virya now appearing, not just is there virya, but does it appear? To be truthful to each moment, to understand what is there. When virya is not there, appearing, what is there appears. Should it be known or should we neglect? Not necessary, because we are trying to understand virya. It shows the very subtle attachment unknown lurks there in any moment of wanting something, because it's not me who just want to have such and such, but it's the function of that which we call it low part. It's that wanting all the time, even stretching out one's hand or just get up. That's it. See, there must be virya too, unknown, until right understanding at level of intellectual understanding is strong enough to understand each characteristic of each reality as it is. So when each of that is there appearing, there can be the understanding of that. But what about knowing that it arises with such and such citta? But does it appear now? To understand it as we have heard about it. But when it's there, is there any understanding to know that it's not me? It's that reality which is different from others, because it is virya there right then. Phassa cannot perform that function. See, we learn to understand each one clearer so that anything appears, there can be moment of conditions to understand that, or no condition to understand it. This is the difference from hearing about the truth of it and no hearing at all about the truth. So it has to be this moment when you are trying to put on your shoe because it's so tight. It's time to understand what is there as a self. But there's forgetfulness all the time because not enough understanding of the truth, that it can condition moment of direct understanding what is there as it is, different ones. So now we know how many cittas arise with virya, but what about now? Understanding has to understand what is there, but there must be hearing about it. Otherwise, there cannot be any understanding of the truth of that which is there. Attachment is there, trying to put on the shoes. See, who knows? That which want to put on the shoe. Or other. That's why we talk about each one to understand when what appears one by one.
Thank you, Ajahn. Our time is up by my clock. Thank you very much for everything. This has been a great discussion. So we will see everyone next week.
Yes,
Yes, thanks everyone.